Just as venture capital is dying. No, just kidding. It's not dying. We're seeing some big M&A. DoorDash bought Deliveroo.
And DoorDash is also acquiring 7 rooms for $1.2 billion. So a total of $5 billion shopping spree for DoorDash this week. Windsurf obviously got sold to OpenAI for $3 billion.
The Windsurf acquisition, it's causing a lot of conversations about what is acquirable and what is in the way.
Does this mean that OpenAI kind of picked the winner and now the rest of the startups in that category are screwed?
I'm looking at Google stock right now, and today it dropped 8% alone, which on like a $2 trillion market cap company is like $150 billion, which is just crazy.
Yeah, but on a relative basis, like it's pretty sideways.
But other things aren't sideways. Meta's not sideways.
Mark Andreessen famously said venture capital will definitely be one of the last jobs overtaken by AI. There's a lot of human empathy and art in venture capital.
What a ridiculous statement. Can we just pause on that statement? Well, hello, Morins. It's just us. Welcome to another episode of More or Less.
We're down to less. One less.
I'm actually in a good mood, too. So I don't know. I'm not going to be able to bring...
Because he's gone?
No conjecture on that.
Unrelated to my husband's latest business trip, but more like, can I hold down the... Cantankerous is the wrong word. The sort of grumpy, curmudgeonly... Everything is something. I don't know.
Maybe it's not actually your nature.
Things are complicated. I'm a journalist. It's very much in my nature. What am I kidding? I can throw water at all these earnings. Well, welcome everyone. Another busy week in tech as we count down. We're a few episodes away from episode 100, guys.
I have some thoughts about a special guest, Jess. We should talk after this about it.
Oh, good. I've been polling and all our friends are like, oh, you four, no one could possibly be more special. And I'm like, I disagree, but we'll make it good whenever it is. And it's been another crazy week. What's been new with you guys this week?
Well, there was some news yesterday. Can I say it, Dave? Are you okay if I shout you out? Because I'm a proud wife.
Yeah. This is a good moment for a proud wife.
Yeah. Well, I think was it Stanford? Someone pulled who the top angel investors of unicorns were of all time. And guess who topped number 1 on the list?
Dun, 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 dun.
David Morin, actually. I'm pretty sure that's you. I'm not sure if there's another one. And you were right above Peter Thiel, which I thought was really interesting. And, a lot of our friends and a lot of the back channel members were on that list. We've got all kinds of folks there.
Lee Linden
was actually pretty far up there. Scott Belsky, who's been one of our guests, Aaron Levy, one of our guests. A lot of our guests have been on Mark Andreessen, David Sachs, Kevin Hartz. So definitely a contentious group. Sadly, no women made the list. And I didn't spy Sam Lessin on the list, but I did see Kevin Colleran on the list. I don't know if that was a mistake.
Yeah, Kevin's an amazing angel investor. That's how we got Slow going in the first place.
How did they determine who at a firm does a deal? This is always the question.
My understanding, I don't know anything about this methodology. And so there's questions abound about the methodology on the internet. And my favorite thing is all the people tweeting at me asking who David is.
Yes, that's very funny.
Which suggests to me actually that they are looking at some data set or data sets which actually has cap tables, and they're not actually looking at firm level. And that's the only reason my full name would actually be showing up.
Ooh, a clue. I like it.
Yeah.
Have we thought to ask them? Has anyone reached out and done the journalism thing?
There's people, I think, talking to them on LinkedIn.
Sam probably reached out already because he wants to know why he's not there.
It's a good week for Sam. This is when I have to talk about, Sam being on the Midas list, up and comer. I got to represent.
Yeah. Lick his cookie for him, Jess.
We have amazing seed investors abound. But Dave, this is awesome. So It's specifically looking at getting into unicorns, billion-dollar companies before they're billion-dollar companies. Like, what's your favorite unicorn investment? Like, give us a story.
Oh, good question.
Bring us into a coffee shop circa 2006, Menlo Park.
Maybe Robinhood is coming to mind for some reason. And, working with Baiju and those guys there. Baiju and I actually end up going to Japan together and doing a bunch of strategy work in Japan with our now partner, James Higa from Offline. I don't know. The stories go on and on. I guess like one of the more interesting things about this is just that, I don't know, you can like debate the scoreboard all you want, but I'm just, I guess, proud to have been playing the game for a long time. Like it's a very long game and you have to miss a lot. And, sometimes you get it right and you get to work with founders who matter. And, it's a wonderful game to keep playing. I'm happy to still be in it. So I'll take the win, even though my initial instinct was like, what's the methodology here?
Well, both things can be true. But
Okay, but my comments here are, A, there are no women on this list.
You've said that twice, but yes, we know.
I think that Cyan Bannister would probably be on the list if they,
So what I was going to say was Scott Bannister's on the list. And so was that maybe partially Cyan? And then, there were some deals that Dave did that I was at, it's our pool of money. We there are a lot of, and so some of the feedback I got was like, how many of these people on this list have spouses?
But most of these were pre-offline, right?
Yeah. No, pre-offline. Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying is like maybe even pre-slow. And so I don't know. It's interesting, but I really do hope that we see a future where there's more representation of women on this list because it's kind of sad.
I think there is representation. I think that's something to just note that there are amazing female angel investors out there. And again, whatever this data set is, it may just be entity based. There's literally looking at names showing up on cap tables. And so people could be in entities, people could be in all kinds of things. I don't know.
It's a cool data point, just as venture capital is dying. No, just kidding. It's not dying. Well, Brit, there was a lot of news this week on at least one of your top 3 favorite subjects, which is M&A. Do you want to start there? Like we're seeing some big M&A. DoorDash bought Deliveroo, leading food delivery service in the UK for, I think, just under $4 billion.
And DoorDash is also acquiring 7 rooms for $1.2 billion. So a total of $5 billion shopping spree for DoorDash this week. Datadog is buying a startup for $220 million. Windsurf obviously got sold to OpenAI for $3 billion.
That's the big one.
Why do you say it's the big one, Dave?
Keep going, Britt.
The last one I wanted to point out, which is not a big number because they didn't actually publish a number, which usually means it wasn't really a great deal. But Ezra joined Function Health, which I thought was interesting. I've been tracking a lot of the health AI stuff going on. And so that was an interesting pairing that I saw get done this week as well.
Jess, to answer your question, the Windsurf acquisition is perhaps a watershed moment for the AI ecosystem. It's causing a lot of conversations about what is acquirable and what is in the way of the big foundational models like OpenAI and Anthropic. And so I've had a lot of inside baseball conversations with other GPs this week and last week. I think it's being driven by both that acquisition and just a lot of what we're seeing in the world of potential startup investments right now. Everything has AI associated with it. And so the constant conversation is this investable or not, and why? And so there's this big, like you're hearing it a lot. You're hearing it on podcasts. A lot of people are asking this question, like, what is the app layer? What is investable in the app layer of AI?
Investable meaning you're going to make your money and not lose money.
Yeah, you're not going to lose money. And this one kind of is it's the first big acquisition in AI land. And so are there more?
So Windsurf, it's a code editor.
Yeah. Competitor with Cursor.
Yeah. And the information's recently reported Amazon is also developing one of these.
And Cursor raised like $900 million this week at a $9 billion valuation, I believe. So interesting timing that they both, one got acquired, one raised, and then news of Amazon starting to build their own.
Yeah, I mean, these are important developer tools, right? In the world of these businesses, you've got two sides to the businesses. You've got the consumer side, which we've much debated, but then you have the business side where you're selling your access to your API to businesses of all sizes and shapes, and you have to have tools for them to use it. And so this is a major part of the developer ecosystem.
Does this mean that like, did OpenAI kind of pick the winner and now the rest of the startups in that category are screwed?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, Google also launched Firebase. I think it's called Firebase Studio last week, and it's insanely good.
Is this where one does one's vibe coding?
Yeah. Yeah, these are all vibe coding tools.
But I can't go in and say, like, build me an app that does this. Like, you need to be a little more technical.
I think that's actually the question, Jess. A lot of these things are like these weird hybrids between the old way of engineering and this new emerging vibe coding world. And I think you're actually right that there is a future where it's going to be a heck of a lot easier and the interface isn't going to look like the old way. But most of these look like the old way infused with AI right now.
So I was talking to like maybe a 22-year-old last week who just launched an AI company. And she was claiming there's a backlash against vibe coding. And I was like, oh, tell me more, as a 3 days shy of 42-year-old. And she was saying that basically engineers are like pushing back against these tools, which was news to me. And I don't know, this was an East Coast perspective, but I'm curious, have you guys heard about any of the backlash?
I think my interpretation, Dave, maybe you have a different one, is that, you know, engineers don't believe they're going to be fully replaced. And there's like this big message going on, like no one needs to learn how to code anymore. Engineering is dead. And it's more that this is augmenting what engineers can do, how productive they can be. And it does like definitely lower the bar. You know, there are apps that I've been using, Bubble, which is one that is great for sort of the everyday user to create a basic app. It's not like you would build like a Life 360 or a more complex app using something like that. And Lovable, which makes like really beautiful websites using just like chatting with an agent, which has Stripe integration and all these different things that typically you would have hired a web development firm to code in for you, or something more than Squarespace or Shopify. And so like there are definitely tools for everyday users to be able to use without hiring engineers or agencies. But, you know, the sort of senior software engineer that's based inside of some of these very large tech companies, I don't think are going to be replaced anytime soon, as much as they will be augmented and able and sort of supercharged, which is just like the rest of what AI is doing for the broader tech ecosystem in the world.
The meeting I had before recording this podcast was I was at a board meeting, and the VP of engineering actually directly addressed this question, Jess, because somebody asked the question, like, how is vibe coding affecting your engineering team? This is a company that's on fire. They're doing extremely well. They're scaling very quickly. And her response was pretty pointed, that most of us, of course, use these tools. The real engineers on the team use the tools to answer their questions. Perhaps the most useful way that these tools have changed things is that it takes much less time now to onboard a new engineer into the code base, because you don't have to understand where everything is. And I was telling her, yeah, this reminds me of when we were, building Facebook in the early days. We used to have to plan a certain amount of time for every new engineer that was onboarded, just learning where everything was, right? I mean, that took actually a non-trivial amount of time. So that's not a thing anymore. And then the main problem has been actually when people who are either junior engineers or not engineers, people that are product managers or designers.
They think they're engineers. It's like when I think I'm,
yes. And they do something that crashes production. And they had a whole bunch of specific examples of this where people didn't intend to cause harm, but they just don't know actually what they're doing with the complexity of how large-scale software systems are managed in terms of the code workflows and the production workflows and the deployment workflows. And so this, vibe-coded code gets into the workflow and then causes a whole problem and it takes down production or takes down something right before it gets to production, and they lose a whole day of engineering trying to unwind this problem. And so that's the main thing that they're like really on guard for and trying to train people not to do.
These pesky vibe coders. So I hear the sentiment, right, that like this doesn't replace these senior engineers. Then you have people like Dario, the CEO and co-founder of Anthropic, just flat out saying, 60+% of their code is generated with AI, or so. I'm making up that number, but sort of directionally, like, and making very bold predictions. How do you jibe those two things?
I mean, 60% is the right way to think about it. 60% is not 100%, right? And so what you're hearing from the Darios and the, Karpathy, the guys that are the leaders in the field, they're all saying kind of the same thing, that what this has really done is enabled them to dramatically increase their personal output. And they don't have to search around the internet anymore for how to answer this question or how to use that framework, or even search inside of their own code base or the code base they've been asked to help with. They can find where they need to get to really quickly. And they can do the work of many, many, many engineers, but they still need to understand the architecture and what they're actually doing. That's been even my own personal experience vibe coding and building things for myself, is if I didn't understand software architecture, I would be in a way worse place with understanding what the heck is going on across this application. Or, I was talking to somebody who vibe coded their own app last week, and they were super excited. And they were asking me a question about how to make search faster in this iPhone app that they created. And I said, show me your Xcode project. And so I looked at the Xcode project and I noticed these two CSV files that were like enormous, like huge CSV files. I'm like, what are these CSV files? And they're like, that's the database. And I was like, you're not using core data? You're not storing the data in an actual data table? And they were like, no, is that what you're supposed to do? And I just said, yeah, I mean, if you want to have fast search, and I sort of explained like how search works. And so there's like this thing, and that's just a tiny little example of likely what's happening at very large scale, where you can get efficiencies out of your workflow as a team and as an individual, but you're still dealing with, depending on how large the engineering problem is, very different scale problems in software engineering that you have to kind of know what you're doing architecturally. So I don't think the architecture thinking goes away.
Yeah, with AI, I don't think, again, it's just interesting. I don't think that what happens is all the jobs instantly go away, but you need fewer better is just how these things generally, I think, play out. But we will see. But let's say, just to wrap up the acquisition point a little bit, because I think what's happening, like, you're seeing all these companies that kind of are like, it just seems like people are like, what, we can't get the price we would have gotten last year or the year before or 3 years before that, but we got to make a move here. Is that what is sort of like the holdouts caving in a little bit? Not that these are bad prices per se, but they're below what these companies have raised at.
The M&A prices or the fundraising?
Well, M&A, with the exception of like Windsurf. Like, I mean, if we're looking in the sort of more mature stuff that's happening, like food delivery and stuff.
Well, I mean, that was from what I read, at least, in after effect of just like a great earnings. And so the stock was up and they had more cash flow to be using on acquisition. I think like the fact that the market has actually been doing better since some of the tariff dips, I think is encouraging a lot of these companies to bolster themselves in the market.
But these deals have to be in the works for months. Like any of these deals happening now didn't.
Well, the stock has been like, I guess despite the Trump blip that happened, it's now back up even over the last month or so pretty dramatically. But for the last 6 months, it's been relatively, 6 months ago, is before the inauguration, it was doing well. And so I think that a lot of companies have continued to hit their or beat earnings. I mean, we have more news about earnings this week. They're looking for ways to continue to grow. And so it's natural that they're able to use some of that capital to, expend on these tools that can help them do so. And I think Windsurf is a different one, which is like they're in this market that's kind of crowded. Cursor, Amazon, everyone else, they were going out to fundraise at a $3 billion valuation from what I understand. And so this was just like a simpler way for them to tuck into OpenAI.
Okay, are there any categories you guys think are going to be hot for M&A? I did sign an NDA this week for a deal I'm looking at. So I'm just digital media, baby.
Another one.
I mean, I kind of agree with you, Jess. I think digital media is the most undervalued asset class right now.
Operators got to operate, just looking at stuff. I mean, if there was like a huge deal I was excited about, I would not even be saying that on the podcast at this point. So, Dave, the problem with digital media is like, who's going to buy these things?
You have to bet in the future, Jess. You know, who knows? 5 years from now, things could be very different.
I told Dave everyone in digital media should just start going analog and making magazines, because as the pendulum keeps swinging, heavy AI, heavy tech, screens everywhere, humans are just going to want that tactile and experiential element of what media could offer.
Oh, Brit, look, yes, very tactile.
And I know you're on top of the trend, and I think there's more of that to be had.
Just feels so good in the hands.
It's really pretty, actually. Yeah, paper quality matters. Once again, I'm going to start sending real notes in the mail too. I've decided that aren't AI written and that are my real handwriting, because now you can do all of the stuff with AI and fake handwriting. But I'm not. I'm going to do real handwriting notes in the mail.
Brit, if you send me, you've already given me AI toasts. I want like a real written.
That's what I'm saying. I'm going fully analog, really offline, embracing the name.
Quills are back in too.
Oh yeah, I'll do some calligraphy probably.
Okay, so digitally, I will make the bold predictions that you will not see a wave of digital media acquisitions.
Then why are you buying them?
Because they're cheap.
I'm not. I mean, I just sign NDAs to read numbers that I then can't talk about. It's fascinating. Love seeing other people's businesses.
New York Times passed 11 million subscribers, so they're still growing.
There's always a price, Dave. This is what my husband teaches me about deals. There's always a price. Always a price. Okay, so M&A, we're keeping an eye out. Brit, you referred to another big news. We've got to get through some of the AI news of the week. Big AI news as it relates to browsers. So we heard, I think it came out through some of these trials happening in DC. I guess there's a reporter you love when the people who won't talk to you are forced to testify. It's a real font of information. And I think it was Eddie Q who said that Apple is looking at replacing Google with its own AI in Safari. Did I get that right?
That's right. In addition to Safari searches have started to wane.
Isn't that all searches are starting to wane?
All searches, but I think Eddie Q is sort of taking a big leap out there to suggest that AI search is replacing standard search as we know it, which Google has already started to do in various ways.
They haven't admitted it though. I think it's okay to actually say search is dying. I've seen enough data in the last 2 or 3 weeks that suggests this is the case. That it's actually, I mean, we're not talking about little 2% dips. We're talking about 45, 50% dips. Like these are real changes.
I think it's the right direction, Dave. And even though, Google's saying we're seeing ChatGPT chip away at some kind of queries, but not the ones we make money off of. So don't worry, shareholders. But by the time you're admitting that, the market is changing. And I think the spotlight has been on Google for how it's going to adapt. We've got I/O coming up in 2 weeks, their big developer conference. And it is fun. You can go through that Google search results page and you can be like, okay, these are the advertisements to make money. This is where it's experimenting to see if it can answer. Here's where it's still sending some traffic to publishers so they don't get too mad. And you go to your favorite chatbot and there's none of that except, well, I don't use the ones that have all the crowded stuff. And it's very interesting. And so, yeah, this browser news is interesting. I got to say, though, and I know my audience and my co-hosts here, but Apple really needs, if it's going to be in the sort of LLM type game in search and AI, as opposed to like optimizing cool on-device use cases, it's really got up its game. And by all accounts, all our reporting of the information just shows a huge freaking mess over there as it relates to all that stuff.
Was this where was this information coming from, Jess? Is this Was this a leak out of the trial, or was this an actual leak from the company, or was this an announcement?
I think it was Q's testimony.
Oh,
Eddie Q says Apple is actively looking to reshape. Okay, there's a lot in there. Safari to focus on AI search.
yeah. I guess, was this sensationalizing, or is this real information?
No. Look, you think someone like Eddie Q doesn't say that statement without the company debating for 3 or 4 weeks what exactly he should say? I mean, I don't think this is sensationalizing at all. I think it's a very, what it says is that Eddie wants the world to know this. It doesn't mean that they're going to be successful at it. And I am old enough to remember when Apple tried to build a search engine so it wasn't dependent on Google, and that didn't go so well.
Or Google tried to build a social network, and on and on. Yeah.
Yeah. But also, the other part of this story is the courts are likely to say that the Apple-Google search deal cannot continue in its current form for antitrust reasons. So
isn't that the more likely explanation of this? Because that is the primary thing. That's one of the primary remedies you could see come out of both the Apple and the Google antitrust cases, right?
Right. Although I'm very confused still what would be allowed. Like, because if users could obviously still choose to use Google. And I mean, you're talking about the defaults here, but it's also like, do they just have to open up the bidding process, and could Google still win the bidding process? So it's very complicated. But I think this particular admission from Eddie has ruffled some feathers. Brit, you were making the point, and Google's stock is down meaningfully on the day, in part because it's like, oh, AI in browsers, to your point, Dave, another nail in the coffin of search.
Feels like the market has not priced in that search is dying yet into Google stock.
I don't know. I'm looking at Google stock right now, and since February, it's been pretty low.
It's pretty sideways, isn't it?
No, it's dropped from like 207 to currently 152. So that's like 25%. Today it dropped 8% alone, which on like a $2 trillion market cap company is like $150 billion, which is just crazy.
Yeah, but on a relative basis, like, it's pretty sideways from 2024.
But other things aren't sideways. Meta's not sideways.
Yeah. When you look at it compared to the others, it's definitely the one that's tanked the most of the Magnificent Seven.
But that's the question, Dave. It may not be enough. Or, these are the questions.
What's interesting is if you look at the chart all the way back to the launch of ChatGPT, there was steady growth, throughout the pandemic, and almost to the day of the ChatGPT launch, it's gone sideways. It's really interesting.
I think, and we could do a whole Google series. I would, my reporting heart will always be in Google. It was my first big beat, second big beat, first really though. And I covered it obsessively for a very long time, but it's such a you worked there, Brit. So you also get a Google badge.
I worked there. We could do it together. Yeah. That's the Jess and Brit Google show.
Yeah. We could do it together. But I was in an edit meeting today, and I was like, guys, I just really think the story is this. And one of my editors was like, sounds like you want to write it. I was like, well.
I mean, look at this chart. It's so fascinating.
But Dave, you have to compare no chart without comparing it to the overall stock market or the performance of the sectors.
I think what's so interesting is the smooth curve up until literally the launch of ChatGPT, and then it fell off a cliff, and then it's been trying to get back up.
Well, that's the monopoly curve. And then that's the no longer monopoly trough.
It's the S curve, Dave.
It's the M. It kind of looks like an M. It's the M curve. I'm going to brand that. When your investors no longer believe you're a monopoly. But what I'm interested in at Google too is I think the next year or two for how the consumer search and AI goes will really go a long way towards what kind of company Google is going to be. And I think there's a scenario where Google Cloud continues to grow, and even the leadership of the enterprise side gets more power, and Google starts to feel more like an enterprise company, which would be crazy in a lot of respects. But I suspect that's a tension really playing out at the company, and I think it's quite interesting.
So it's the Microsoft theory of Google.
I mean, if you look at the Thomas Kurian who runs Google Cloud, or TK, his deputies are all Microsoft people, all of them.
So interesting that. Because Microsoft is just, an enterprise company these days. I even saw last week that Microsoft is now selling Xbox games on the PlayStation. They're just sort of they've gone fully enterprise across the board.
Well, they're also the world's most valuable company, or number 2, depending on the day. So this is not like a bad, but I don't know. I mean, would Larry Page ever put Thomas Kurian in as CEO of Google? I don't know. Stranger things have happened. Stranger things. Again, I don't think any of that's imminent, but if you're looking down the road, it's a really interesting time. So we've got Apple and Google making waves. We've got all these trials in DC.
But wait, we also talk about Netflix and Disney. So similarly, guess who's also overhauling their search and all of their UI? Netflix. So they are unveiling their innovative new TV experience today.
So I'm not going to get my 17 recommendations.
Yeah, the headlines are the TikTokification of Netflix.
No.
Yes.
It's going vertical video on my TV?
No. It's just the whole screen is you're just swiping through entire, horizontal.
No, there's also video shorts that you can click on to sort of watch It's not trailers, they're like shorts. They're clips from the shows that are in like a TikTok like feed that then you can click in and watch the show.
But those automatically play now.
Yeah, but they're like behind it, Jess. So now that thing that's behind is going to come, that becomes the whole interface, it seems like.
Especially on mobile.
It's very interesting. I mean, I'm just sure Netflix is a very smart company, and I'm very sure they're not giving up the power of those, like the ability to just change the Bridgerton photo 12 times. So I think there's another season of Bridgerton and click on it, even though I know deep in my heart I'm up to date on Bridgerton. Like that is the Netflix playbook, right?
Well, it does now have an overlay on the UI where it could say like new season or like this season that you already watched is like coming again.
Oh, they say that this season's been announced. Or good news, there's a next season.
But like it knows if you watched it now, and you can search like you talk to ChatGPT, which is like, I want to watch a period piece about a hot guy. Just kidding, Dave. And that's relevant for Gen Z.
Yeah, your show You is back, Brit. You should be psyched.
You? I don't know that one.
You don't know You? Okay, you should watch You. But what I don't want, I want to filter out my Netflix. I want to say, please remove anything that's true crime because I don't care. I just want no true crime. I want mostly positive things.
Okay, so new interfaces coming from Netflix. We've got M&A. Do you want to talk a little bit about VC? There was some interesting VC news this week.
The times they are a-changing, Jess.
Sam, don't listen to this episode because he's going to...
Are we allowed to talk about this without Sam? I feel like I'm cheating on him.
Of course we are.
We're deep enough into this episode that Sam will not listen to this. And he will listen to the first 5 minutes and be like, great job, great job. And all you people out there, do not tell him. No, but... Well, the specific news, so there's been a lot of news on kind of new types of fund entities and structures. A couple of weeks ago, I don't think we talked about it, but Thrive, Josh Kushner's firm, launched a holding company, Thrive Holdings, to sort of acquire businesses that can be transformed with AI. And then this week, Philippe Lafonte's Co2 announced a permanent capital fund. So they're a prominent tech hedge fund that also does a lot of late stage and some early stage, meaningful amount of early stage private tech investing. But led by Philippe, they announced something that is, I think, it's anchored with $1 billion from Bezos and Michael Dell. But the premise is that they will accept investments for the relatively low capital amount of $50K, which is traditionally a much lower threshold than it would take to get into a Co2 fund. And so they're billing it as democratizing investing, which it very may well do. I think being anchored by Bezos and Dell was an interesting way to introduce that. But what did you guys think? Did you see this and think like, oh, what struck you as interesting? I'm not close enough to it.
Well, there's a few different ways to look at it, but one of the ways to look at it is, what does it mean that Co2 is having to go to RIAs and lower their prices to get capital?
Okay, so registered investment. Yeah, I think this is an important point. In fact, I replied to Chamath on this point on X.
Oh, what were you?
Well, he was sort of I think this is a good point, Dave. So I want to come back to it. But he was sort of saying it was very bold and innovative because the sort of 2 and 20 old fee models out, and like this is the new norm. And I said, how much of this is just sort of the need to tap new sources of LP capital?
Yeah, so I think you're right, and I think there's also merit, and probably if Sam were here, he'd probably be saying the same thing too. That 2 on 20 for the majority of the venture capital ecosystem, like, is just a bad deal, right? Like most of the venture capital asset class does not perform. If you've got an incremental dollar, putting it into an S&P 500 index fund, for the most part, performs better than almost all of the venture capital asset class. Now, there are venture capitalists out there that do a good job and are still doing venture capital, and perhaps are worth paying the price of 2 on 20, or perhaps even more if they were even better, right? But the idea that people are offering lower prices. I mean, I know this is happening across the board in a variety of different contexts. Like people are changing their prices. It's been extremely hard to raise capital ever since 2021.
Changing their prices, and the GPs are taking less of the profits. And
yeah. Sometimes it's on their core funds. Sometimes it's on SPVs. Sometimes it's like, in a bunch of different ways. If you're new to the business, not being able to charge 2 on 20 is difficult, these kinds of things. But I think it's interesting that a fund with the stature and respect of Coatue is going to retail basically to source capital. Most private equity and venture capital managers would tell you that the timelines of retail or even family offices typically are too short. Their liquidity needs are too short for the longevity needed to sit in a fund. And if I understand the structure correctly, they're sort of building in something on the backside of this to say you can only pull out redemptions on some cadence, and if you do, you get penalized. And so they're trying to like incentivize people to stay in longer. And I also understand it to be a hybrid public and private fund, so maybe you can get some liquidity earlier. Nonetheless, this is going to retail registered investment advisors to raise capital, which is an interesting move for a very traditional hedge fund.
On top of the $1 billion they've raised from 2 people. So that's why I had all those reactions. And like this brought up vague senses of like that, never achieved heyday of crowdfunding, right? That we all, that's different because those platforms are all about investing directly in the companies, but it's similarly like sort of what is the appetite of more retail investment for this category. So yeah.
Also, Jess, just as one point on, $1 billion from Jeff Bezos is like somebody with $100,000 annual salary giving you $500. So like, just to put it in context, it's like literally nothing to these people.
No, totally. Oh, Dave, everyone knows how that. Yes.
I don't know. I don't think a lot of people put into context how much capital 100 or $200 billion is. Like it's unbelievable.
Totally. And also, Michael Dell has actually turned his family office into a very well-known sort of group family office that then bought a merchant bank. So, but anyway, okay. Well, I think, and because Sam wasn't here and I'm a very dutiful wife, I did go back and read his latest slide deck this morning just to refresh my memory of what AI Sam would say about this. And I think it refers to slide 54, bullet point number 3. No, but like, what we're talking about here is venture capitalists being like many different markets. And, we saw that brief period where investors like Coatue, who, I believe like some of Coatue's earliest, most successful investments were in like Apple and Alibaba and like really rode the big public tech giants, right? And then all of a sudden is actively in seed investing, right? And all of these phases. And now there are just so many different types of vehicles.
The thing I was going to say was that there are 2 shifts happening at once, right? The first one is that the way venture capital works is dramatically changing everything from, emerging managers and new fund types, whether it's incubation and stuff like we do, or the creator fund and kind of new strategies. They're all the way up to, $7 billion funds that are doing hedge fund PE style work. That's like one bucket of things happening. And the separate bucket that I don't think people are talking about as much in terms of how these things are correlated is how AI is shifting what venture capital is and what tech startups are and how much capital it takes to create any of these startups and these funds anymore. And, Mark Andreessen famously over the last week, probably to his own advantage, talking his own book, said venture capital will definitely be one of the last jobs overtaken by AI. There's a lot of human empathy and art in venture capital.
What a ridiculous statement. Can we just pause on that statement for it? Like, if I were one of those clever, maybe I could vibe code my way to like a meme or something, but like you could substitute. This is why I should stay behind the notebook, guys. I just don't even know what I'm talking about. But like, if you could, like all these people throughout history claiming they'd be the last person to be disrupted. I mean, it had vibes of like Blockbuster being like, surely people will want to drive to rent VHSs or whatever. And I'm not like, I actually believe there probably will be like a human instinct, and I get the relationships and I totally get all of that, but find me a leader of any company in any industry that couldn't make exactly that same case right now. And it reminded me like, I think there are a lot, Coatue, and written a lot about them over the years, like talk about like data crunching. Yes, people make the investment decisions, right? But so many investors have been building algorithms to inform and make decisions. Google Ventures famously was like long on that strategy too. So anyway, the whole thing made me laugh. He can get a headline, man,
Yeah. He gets really good headlines. He's got a probably 50-person comms team too. So anyway,
just two highly effective people, but yes.
Fine. They're doing a good job. But anyway, these two things are happening at once, which I think is making this a lot more interesting and important for venture capitalists, LPs, and anyone in the ecosystem to take more seriously now than ever. And I think we are going to see some pretty major shifts over the next few years, especially the next probably 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. And you also throw into the mix here, what all of this means is that fundraising for whether you're, a crossover hedge fund or a late stage growth capital or even a seed venture capital operation, right? Like fundraising is hard. It was hard, after 2021 when the market crashed and then rates went up. It was already hard. And, now you've got the Trump administration threatening to decimate college endowments. We know we've already seen this blow up many different deals across the venture capital ecosystem in the last few weeks. And so, the capital stack is just collapsing, right? And, what that effectively means is there's no clear distinction anymore in the ecosystem amongst growth, late stage, crossover, right? And by the way, if you look at the number of Series A's graduating from the seed ecosystem, it's down like over 25% now. So the supply of good startups for all of this capital is actually lower than it's ever been. So that's why you see prices through the roof right now. And everybody, it's like it's 2021 again, right? Like seed stage stuff is $50 million, $30 million, $40 million. There's so much capital and it has nowhere to go.
Well, but there's so much capital, but there's also a lot of risk to some of that capital. To your point that we wouldn't see it yet, but if the endowments pull back, and again, it sounds like maybe you're seeing it. We've been looking for it and
it's out there.
Yeah. And so there's all this capital right now, but it's sort of very unclear and what's going to happen. And you have still the sense that there's a limited pool. So you have, very experienced and seasoned, high profile, high track record people going to the retail market. It's not like we saw, hedge funds try to IPO too, right? To tap this. And so it's wild times. Good luck to all of you out there. It almost sounds as hard as media, but not quite.
Have fun in your journalist world over there. Jess will be in this bubble.
Guys, I started writing an essay on the future of journalism today, and we'll see where it goes. It made it from the notes to the Google Doc.
Yeah, not to the GPT.
I'm not writing an essay on the future of fucking journalism with Chat GPT. I mean, God, do you think I'm crazy?
Maybe you should. It'd be very contrarian.
I think I'll have more to say on that. But before we wrap, we have a couple pop culture things I need to talk about, okay? First, before we get to the Met Gala, which we will, I just read an excerpt from Barry Diller's new book coming out in 2 weeks. And I've got to say, having read this excerpt in New York Magazine, it was really lovely, really well written. And I'm really excited for the book. You don't even have to be like obsessed with Barry Diller, I think, for this to be a good book. I am also in the book, guys, because...
What? That's amazing.
Yes, this has now been confirmed to me by 2 sources. But right before I covered Google, I covered IAC. And I got Barry and John Malone in a multi-year lawsuit that ended up in the breakup of their empire. Apparently, this is covered in the book, so stay tuned. But I pre-ordered 2 hard copy and 1 Kindle copy of this book already based on this excerpt in New York Magazine.
Why do you need 2?
Well, I like giving books away. I give a lot of books to people, like, because I like books. And
see, analog items, analog gifts.
Yeah. I like giving them to people. I don't know that we're going to convince the techies to read about Barry Diller, but we should because, and apparently it's an amazing business book.
Well, hold on. You have to mention, if you don't know, he's married to Diane von Furstenberg, the incredible fashion designer and someone that I've gotten to know over the years.
Which is the subject of
the essay, which is so beautiful. It's like this interesting love story. And they're just both such amazing beast of people, and I love the way he wrote it. It is a great read, so maybe we should put it in our show notes for anyone who wants to read it.
We'll plug it. Also, guys, we got to talk about the Met Gala. So first of all, I just need a pulse check. Did you guys follow the Met Gala?
I did, and I think it was more mid this year than ever before.
I follow it through the group chat ecosystem.
Yeah, the contingent of people that showed up was like, meh. And obviously Taylor wasn't there, so didn't spark my fancy. Not a lot of tech people that went. I didn't think the outfits were as good this year. Maybe that was because of the theme. And I don't know. I don't know. Is it getting stale? I mean, TED is kind of just announced it's doing its last year. Like, I think some of these events that have been going on for a long time are kind of like getting stale and coming to an end. And maybe there's a new era of reinvention.
TED is dead.
But is the Met Gala still?
No, I don't. First of all, a couple interesting data points. It was his most successful year in its history. So something's working.
By what metric?
But fundraising.
For what?
For the Met Costume Institute, which is what this event does. Let us not forget.
I thought it was funny listening to the Today Show explain why all these, rich people get in a room to raise money for costumes. The Today Show, Al Roker had a pretty good explanation.
It's a good explainer. The biography of Anna Wintour that Amy Odell wrote a couple of years ago. I've got some copies of that. If anyone wants one, it's a very good book. Really explains all of this.
Wait, how much was raised? Like $30 million? Isn't the clothing worn on the runway worth more than $30 million?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't know. I don't even... can you put a price on fashion, Dave, please? What's interesting to me is that the Met and Vogue, like, they really try, and they try to have the cool kids always at the Met Gala, right? And you can kind of tell in a given year. I've read somewhere, probably in Amy's book, that the Kardashians were not invited for years and years and years. And the minute Anna decided that Kim could come to the Met Gala, it was really like part of the next phase of her celebrity. And it was a very big deal, right? So there's a lot of, I think they do a pretty good job on like where the pulse is in a lot of ways. And honestly, I probably recognize like 2 out of 10 people. There's like, I increasingly feel like it's, the creators and the influencers and the musicians who are there. It's like shows how out of step I am with a part of culture. But you always saw the Jeff Bezoses, the Lauren Sanchez's, last year, or a couple of years ago, the CEO of TikTok, Johnny Ive, who I think was there this year. And it wasn't like Silicon Valley flood the Met Gala, but like there was, the cool, it would not be out of place to see the cool, young, fashionable startup dude who was sort of in with that crowd. And there was sort of none of that this year.
Evan Spiegel and Miranda Kerr.
Yeah. And obviously Instagram always has they're a major sponsor and co-host of the event. And so you see they're out in full force and they do really interesting coverage stuff. But I was surprised. I mean, I don't even like Greg Brockman was at a pre-party. I don't even know if he was at the event. Maybe he was at the event. Maybe he wasn't.
Is Anna Wintour pissed at tech because tech is ruining media? Is this like some weird subversive backlash?
I'm sure she is. I mean, Anna's never really Anna's always thought that the tech people are a little out there and full of themselves.
Well, and also not stylish.
Yeah, like she probably thinks that about half the people, in her world, right? So it reminded me of that theme we've been talking about too, and on and off the pod, right? About like tech's role in culture and what it is and isn't, and how younger generations and some of their aversion to these smartphones versus flip phones and their sort of back to IRL is sort of all part of like the tech isn't really at whatever that defining edge of that part of culture is, seems notably absent. And that's interesting.
I don't know. It seemed like Sam Altman, like who are the people that should have been there, right? That you would pick if you were Anna.
Yeah, Sam Altman wouldn't be caught dead.
But like these people don't care is my point. I'm like, why do they care?
No, I know they don't. And it's not like, it's a very subtle observation.
I'm just wondering if, to your point, there's like shifts in the seasonality of tech culture where people think it's cool to be pop and mainstream. And right now we're in this building wave where people are just like, fuck all that stupid fashion shit. I'm just going to like hunker down and build my AI startup.
Guys, I don't know. Look, I love our community but it always kind of felt to me like the Met was where tech went to cosplay being relevant. And, we aren't really culture creators. Like technology is not like we are not artists.
But wasn't there a time when tech was, Dave?
That's what I'm saying. I think in the 2010s it was.
You don't think social networking created culture?
No, social networking is a medium for culture, right? When Sabrina Carpenter, or the musicians that were on the carpet last night release an album, technology is the medium by which they do their art, right? Like they move their music and their cultural artifacts through the medium of technology, right? Or they quite literally use technology to create the music. And it's never been the case that tech itself was the culture creator, except maybe Apple, right? Like because Apple actually creates technology tools for the artists, right? Or teenage engineering from, Sweden. But to me, like, I do think there was a minute where the algorithms and the way that these systems were operating was creating a certain kind of content, perhaps, that had a cultural resonance to it. But I think that moment's gone. And I think that what's happening inside of whatever you want to call it, social media or tech writ large now has kind of jumped the shark, lost the bit. Like it's no longer culturally interesting, I don't think. And so I think that's what's going on.
Well, but that's my point. And also, and again, I wasn't implying that like Tim Cook was Sabrina Carpenter, but like there have been eras there have been Met Galas in the last 10 years where Travis Kalanick, Tim Cook, Lorene Powell Jobs, Eddie Q. These are all people who used to go to the Met Gala, right? I mean, these like, and the idea of like whoever the Travis Kalanick of today is not. And I think that is interesting and supportive of your point, Dave. And it just was interesting to me tying back to like how the younger, and we see multiple examples of this too. And obviously like culture is in some ways shaped by just like rebelling against the thing that was before or, so. But it was interesting. I might be the only person on the planet who finds this interesting, but
no, I think this is a super important part of what's going on in the vibe shift right now, Jess. I think we're talking about something that this is happening across the whole cultural strata.
Do I have my pulse on something happening in the vibe shift?
You do.
I do.
Your pulse is correct, Jess.
This is good. Okay.
I think this is one of the most important things going on in culture for what it's worth. Like this is the core heart of the matter. And I think it's like Brit earlier on in the episode talking about physical experiences, and the conversation about magazines versus digital. All of this is the same thing, which is that people are shifting. They are realizing that the real world is more important than the digital world, and that culture creators have always operated in the real world, right? They've operated in the land of emotion and music and art and story and fashion and 3 dimensions, and that's just it's a world outside of the digital.
Yep. Okay. Well, tune in digitally to hear us talk about this emerging world. But with that, it's probably a good time to let our dear listeners put down their earbuds or AirPods or whatever these things are called, and to go out in the real world. An early happy Mother's Day to the mothers out there.
And happy birthday to you, Jess.
Thank you. I asked my middle son if being 42 was old, and he had to think about it for a really long time.
It's the answer to the life, the universe, and everything. So no, it's the best year to be.
Yeah, it's the perfect age.
Hey, I don't feel too old, but he decided 55 would be the point at which I would cross into old.
That seems fair, actually.
So I'm going to put that on my calendar, and we'll take it from there. So, well, a big thank you to the listeners, to our commenters. Please follow us, share this podcast if you think people will find it interesting. We love to hear from you, and we'll be here again next week for another episode of More or Less. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
See you later.
If you enjoyed this show, please leave us a virtual high five by rating it and reviewing it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Find more information about each episode in the show notes, and follow us on social media by searching for @MoreOrLess, @DaveMorin, @Lesson, @JLesson, and as for me, I'm @Brit. See you guys next time.